Our story begins as a certain man widely regarded as the useless eldest son of Cecil Perdium that bear a reputation that makes him unruly, reclusive, and long confined to his chambers. Labeled a madman, few knew the truth. He was a master swordsman. His name was Ghislain Perdium. In the chaos of battle, a knight clad in armor trembled, struggling to process his defeat. He had fallen to Jizlain, someone he once regarded as human refuse. As the North's finest knight, it was unthinkable to him that such a pariah could triumph. Around him, the bodies of fallen comrades lay still. As he writhed in disbelief, another figure approached, a towering man in regal armor, wielding a great axe. His tone was icy, almost bored, as he asked if the knight found the traps to his liking. Furious, the knight demanded how Jizlain, a man he had called worthless, could have orchestrated such a trap. Jizlain stepped closer, his expression unreadable. He calmly revealed that he had foreseen everything, the enemy's numbers, spies, and even their reinforcements. Every move had fallen into place, exactly as he had planned. Shaken, the knight shouted that he still had a hidden ace. How could Jizlain, of all people, defeat him? Before he could finish, Jizlain silenced him with a swift kick to the face. Then, removing his helmet, Jizlain declared his ambition, to not only win this war, but every battle yet to come. He asked if the knight understood why his victory was certain. With a calm, confident smile, he said, "Because I hold every plan required for triumph." The story rewound 1 year. In a soldier's camp within the Lethania kingdom near Perdium estate, Jizlain jolted awake in a tent. Gasping, he instinctively felt his neck. He was alive. Moments ago, at least in his mind, he had been killed. A knight in golden armor had slain him. Yet here he was. He staggered to a barrel of water and peered into it. His face, younger, too young. Panic churned in his chest. Was he dreaming? Had mages experimented on him? If so, he'd make them pay. As he brooded, a sword beside the barrel caught his eye. A voice called to him, "Young master." A man entered, Ricardo, a soldier loyal to the Perdium household. As he approached, Jizlain moved behind him in a flash, sword at his throat. Ricardo froze, calm despite the blade. He warned Jizlain he was crossing a line. Taken aback by Ricardo's nonchalance, Jizlain demanded answers. Ricardo waved him off, reminding him that he'd thrown a tantrum earlier about wanting to lead a raid against the orcs before passing out. Ricardo tossed him a bag, saying it was time to move. Still bewildered, Jizlain asked where they were headed. Ricardo replied, "Perdium estate." Stunned, Jizlain grabbed him, "You mean, the fallen Perdium estate?" The scene shifted. Jizlain now stood atop a cliff, gazing at the estate. It was whole, untouched. He remembered its smoldering ruins, the day it was destroyed. Yet here it stood, pristine. Ricardo stepped beside him and asked if he'd been dreaming. He warned Jizlain that calling the estate fallen could get him expelled. But Jizlain couldn't shake the truth. Everything around him was real. The reflection, the pain, the air. Somehow, he had returned to the past. Memories flooded in, his arrogance, his shame, his flight from home. Years of hardship as a mercenary had forged him into something more. He returned too late in his previous life, the estate was already gone. But now, here it was, intact, full of life. Laughter bubbled up within him, half relief, half madness. But it didn't last. Ricardo reminded him of the mission, a raid on the orcs. Panic surged. He remembered that raid, how it had gone horribly wrong. Reports said there were only 3 orcs. In truth, there were over 20. Eager to prove himself, he had led the squad. Nearly everyone died. Not this time. He would approach the orcs with strategy, not pride. But how would he earn the trust of soldiers who saw him as a failure? A deafening crash snapped him back. A wooden guard post flew through the air, smashing down. Orcs had come, far earlier than in his past life. Chaos erupted. The orcs tore through men with brute force. Scoven, the squad's commander, shouted orders, trying to form ranks. He faced an orc head-on, barely deflecting a massive blow. Then came a warning. An orc charged from behind, weapon raised. Just before the strike landed, Jizlain shoved Scoven aside and intercepted the blow. With swift precision, he severed the orc's fingers, then slashed its thigh. The beast collapsed, howling. Soldiers stared in disbelief. Jizlain scowled, not at the enemy, but at himself. He lacked mana, yet, he cursed that he hadn't returned sooner. Turning to Scoven, Jizlain said only one thing, with absolute conviction. "Give me command of the squad." Scoven was stunned. He'd always considered Ghislain reckless, but demanding command mid-battle, with soldiers, lives hanging in the balance, was beyond anything he'd anticipated. Standing tall, Scovin refused, firmly explaining that the Lord's authority wasn't to be relinquished lightly. Annoyed, but understanding, Jizlain reflected that he might have reacted the same way if an inexperienced fool had made such a demand. As he mused, an orc charged. Scovin yelled for Jizlain to retreat, insisting he was too inexperienced to lead the squad. Faced with no alternative, Jizlain braced himself. What followed astonished everyone. He hurled his sword. Scovin instinctively dodged, spun, and grabbed Jizlain to demand an explanation. Before the words left his mouth, a sound behind him drew his attention. Jizlain's sword was embedded in the orc's skull. The creature collapsed silently, its weak point struck with deadly precision. Scovin gasped, astonished. How? Jizlain, unfazed, stated, victory on the battlefield is about morale. He gestured to the trembling men, their resolve shaken by the orc's intimidating cries. With a confident smile, he declared, we seize momentum. He sprinted forward, retrieving his sword, leaping into the enemy's midst. He landed squarely on another orc, driving his blade deep into its skull. The soldiers gasped, watching as he stood atop the creature, shouting, taunting the remaining orcs, vowing to kill them all. Undeterred, Jizlain cut into the stomachs of 2 approaching orcs, severed the arm of a third. Heads rolled, blood sprayed as he moved through the battlefield. From a distance, Scovin watched in disbelief. Even he, a skilled mana user, found confronting orcs with such efficiency challenging. Yet here was Jizlain, a seemingly frail young man, tearing through the monsters with unmatched precision. As the fight progressed, Scovin noted Jizlain's exhaustion. His movements grew smaller, more deliberate, conserving energy while evading attacks. Each strike targeted the orc's weak points with surgical accuracy. Scovin realized Jizlain was fighting like a sword master, mastering combat without mana, relying solely on refined technique and instinct. Jizlain taunted the orcs as he darted away, mocking their reputation, claiming he wasn't even warmed up. Despite his confident words, the sight of all the orcs charging left Ricardo shocked. A soldier pointed out that Jizlain was running away, even as he continued his trash talk. Concerned, Ricardo called to Scovin. Scovin struggled to understand Jizlain's strategy. He acknowledged the brilliance of drawing the orcs' attention, but the direction, directly to the edge of a cliff, perplexed him. Then, understanding struck. He ordered his troops to form a shield wall and prepare to follow their young master. Reaching the cliff's edge, Jizlain braced himself against the orcs' relentless attacks, silently hoping Scovin would discern his intent. With a faint smile, he assured himself he'd done enough. As if on cue, the orcs turned at the sound of soldiers advancing. The sight of Scovin and his men, spears at the ready, forming a solid shield wall, caused the orcs to hesitate. Jizlain grinned. Perfect timing, he declared, leaping off the cliff. The moment Jizlain disappeared, Scovin ordered the soldiers to push the orcs over the edge. The troops advanced, shouting, driving their spears into the monsters. Overwhelmed, the orcs were pushed off the cliff, one by one, their bodies tumbling, painting the area in blood. The soldiers stood stunned, marveling at their achievement. Scovin rushed to the cliff's edge, calling for Jizlain. He spotted his young master clinging to the cliff side, his sword embedded in the rock. Jizlain, breathing heavily, smiled weakly. Scovin, relieved, stretched out his hand. Jizlain's depleted stamina caused his grip to weaken. He slipped, releasing his sword, plummeting into the abyss. Scovin and the soldiers watched in horror. The scene shifted to a hazy memory. Jizlain heard a familiar voice, Alina's. Images flooded his mind. Her tears, her gratitude, the bitter words she'd spoken. He felt a tug, saw Elena as a little girl, asking to go with him. Awakened by this vision, Jizlain opened his eyes. He was in a room, a cloth across his forehead. The soldiers had saved him. Relief washed over him, yet the strangeness of the dream persisted. Attempting to sit up, pain overcame him. The door opened. Belinda, the maid with white hair, entered, beaming. She expressed her worry, reminding him she'd advised him to leave the battle to the soldiers. Astonished, Jizlain embraced her tightly. Belinda, shocked, asked if she'd offended him. Jizlain reassured her, saying he was simply happy to see her. Since his childhood, Belinda had been his tutor, remaining by his side despite his immature antics. After the Perdium family's ruin in his previous life, she'd vanished. Confused, Belinda asked why he'd be so happy when they saw each other every day. Jizlain felt the need to share the truth. He urged her to listen, revealing he'd died and come back to life. Belinda laughed, assuming he was exaggerating. Ghislain clarified he wasn't referring to the recent battle. Belinda dismissed his words, warning him to focus on his safety. Frustrated, Ghislain grew insistent. Belinda shifted the subject, asking what he would do if too injured to attend the upcoming festival. His sister, Elena, had been eagerly awaiting this day. Ghislain glanced at a picture of himself and his sister, recalling the annual festival. His trauma had kept him from enjoying it in his previous life. He asked Belinda when the festival would begin. Next week, she replied, a date etched in Ghislain's memory, the day his life changed forever. Lost in thought, someone entered the room. Ghislain was shocked to see Elena, who had come to visit. Without hesitation, Ghislain ran to embrace his little sister. Belinda and Elena both stared in surprise. Elena, startled by her brother's unusual display of affection, asked him what he was doing. Ghislain told her he had missed her, but Elena pushed him back, remarking that his behavior was creepy. Ghislain was further taken aback by her strength, having never realized how strong she was. Elena, dusting off her clothes, explained that she had come because Belinda had asked her to visit. She demanded to know what game he was playing and questioned whether he thought this would fix everything. Ghislain, confused, asked what she was talking about. Elena reminded him of his past behavior, recounting how he had once told her to leave him alone because she was annoying and that he felt disgusted by her very breath. Hearing this, Ghislain was horrified by the memory. In his previous life, he had not been close to Elena, and he admitted to himself that he had been a terrible brother. Overwhelmed with guilt, Ghislain apologized to his sister for his past actions. Elena was stunned, she had never seen her master apologize first. Elena, skeptical, asked if he had hit his head. She mentioned hearing that an orc had struck him during the raid. Ghislain, irritated, wondered why both Belinda and Elena kept bringing this up. He corrected them, insisting he was the one who defeated the orcs. But as soon as he spoke, a sharp pain shot through his body, and he collapsed. With a smug smile, Elena teased him, remarking that he had returned unconscious after battling the orcs. Belinda and Elena laughed at the sight of him trembling, leaving Ghislain surprised by their laughter, yet deep down he was happy to see them acting just as he remembered. Reflecting on his past, Ghislain regretted how much time he had wasted on meaningless pursuits. He remembered the festival that would occur next week. In his previous life, he had rejected Elena's offer to go together, claiming the events of the raid had upset him. That decision marked the last time he ever saw his sister. Elena's shredded body had been discovered along with her bodyguards. In Ghislain's previous life, he couldn't shake the regret of not accompanying her that day. As these thoughts consumed him, a knock on the door interrupted his brooding. Two armored men entered the room, Jamal and Philip, Elena's bodyguards. Jamal informed Elena that they were waiting for her. Elena, slightly annoyed, reminded the men that she had asked them to wait outside. Apologizing, Jamal explained that the servants had requested her assistance in overseeing their work on the festival supplies. This revelation surprised Ghislain, who questioned why the maids would assign such a task to Elena. Belinda, ever blunt, remarked that Ghislain was clueless because he spent his days lazing about. She explained that per diem was suffering from a worker shortage, forcing even the young lady to contribute. The news shocked Ghislain. He couldn't believe such a shortage existed, though it made sense. His past self had never paid attention to the estate's affairs. Elena announced that she needed to leave, but as she turned to go, Ghislain unexpectedly volunteered to help. Both Elena and Belinda were taken aback. Elena, skeptical, wondered aloud if her brother had truly been hit on the head during the raid. Later, in the town, servants busily prepared for the festival. Elena could be heard scolding Ghislain, who had followed her despite her protests. She argued that his presence would frighten the workers. Ghislain countered, questioning whether this was how she treated someone offering assistance. With a sharp reply, Elena told him that the best way he could help was by staying out of their way. As his sister tried to push him away, Ghislain's mind wandered to the grim discovery of her body in his previous life. Determined to prevent this outcome, he resolved to familiarize himself with every corner of the castle to uncover potential threats. Amid the commotion, a soldier ran toward them, addressing Ghislain as his lord. The voice instantly triggered recognition, and Ghislain identified the man as old Fergus. Breathing heavily, Fergus wiped his sweat, relieved to see his master alive and well. Grabbing Ghislain, Fergus humbly referred to himself as a loyal servant and explained that he had come immediately upon hearing news of the orcs. Ghislain, irritated by the constant reminders of the raid, dismissed the topic. Brusquely, Elena approached Fergus, commending his timely arrival. With a sly smile, she explained that her brother had been acting strangely since waking up and begged Fergus to escort him back to his room. The old soldier readily agreed, much to Ghislain's annoyance. His infamous hooligan reputation was becoming an obstacle, even in situations like this. Resigned, Jizlain decided to delay his investigation of the castle until the following week. Turning to Fergus, he requested to be taken to an abandoned training field within the estate. Fergus was taken aback and asked why Jizlain wanted to go there. With a resolute expression, Jizlain declared his intent to train. The old man was astonished but complied with the request. Arriving at the training ground, Jizlain was surprised by its pristine condition. The area was well maintained, the weapons in excellent shape, and the grounds ready for use. It was far better than anything he had encountered as a mercenary. Fergus explained that the facility had been kept in readiness in case Jizlain ever wished to use it. The old soldier admitted that he had always believed Jizlain's recklessness was a phase he would outgrow. Jizlain, moved by the man's faith in him, tapped Fergus's armor and declared that he intended to live a long life. With a somber expression, he added that dying was a terrible experience, one he never wished to repeat. The old man was startled by Jizlain's words and asked why his young master spoke as though he had already experienced life and death. Jizlain, wearing a confident smile, commended Fergus for his sharpness. He explained that he had indeed died and been resurrected. Fergus dismissed the comment, insisting he had no time for jokes. Jizlain then instructed Fergus to leave, stating his intent to begin training. Bowing his head, Fergus complied and left the room. Left alone, Jizlain reflected on how he had treated everyone around him in his previous life, often regarding them as enemies. He realized his short-sightedness had alienated those who could have stood by his side. Memories of the past returned to him. Elena's death had been orchestrated by a neighboring territory, which used her demise to provoke Per Diem into a war. The conflict eventually led to the household's downfall. Elena's tragic death had been the catalyst for it all. Determined to rewrite his family's fate, Jizlain resolved to set things right in this life. To achieve his goals, he needed to strengthen his physique and refine his abilities. Although time was limited, Jizlain was confident in his capacity to master mana control. Sitting in a lotus position, he began to meditate. Mana, a supernatural force enabling humans to surpass their limits, was said to be challenging to detect and harness. For Jizlain, however, it was second nature. Even amidst the chaos of battle, he had easily connected with the mana particles floating in the air, bundling them together as if spinning thread on a spool. With his battle-hardened experience, creating a mana core was a straightforward task. But Jizlain knew that a single core wasn't sufficient. His success as one of the 7 strongest men had come from mastering an advanced technique. Using knowledge from a half-burned magic book he had found in his previous life, he developed a method to create additional cores. By forming a connected network of 2, or even 3, cores, he could generate explosive power. As he pushed mana through his body, Jizlain screamed in pain. Blood poured from his nose and mouth, and he was disheartened to realize he could only create 3 cores. In his past life, he had managed 5. The technique, while powerful, demanded an immense amount of mana, and Jizlain knew its limitations well. It was this very method that had left him vulnerable during his fight with Aiden. The noble knight had brought an entire knight order to the battle, overwhelming Jizlain when he had run out of mana. He was convinced that he would have won if the fight had been fair. Though unstable, Jizlain was undeterred. He had youth and time on his side now and vowed to refine the technique further. Anger flared within him as he promised to take vengeance on Aiden and the traitorous allies of House Per Diem who had conspired to destroy it. He swore that this time he would be the one to deliver the final blow. The scene shifted to the day of the festival. Jizlain donned his gear and made his way to the festival grounds. Elena, spotting her brother, was visibly shocked. She approached him, asking if something was wrong and reminding him that he had never shown interest in such events before. Jizlain calmly replied that, as a member of the Per Diem household, it was necessary for him to attend these gatherings occasionally. Elena looked at him suspiciously, remarking that he had been acting strangely lately. She went on to say that she had heard rumors about his week-long training regimen, a stark departure from his usual indolence. With a nervous expression, Jizlain explained to his sister that there was nothing unusual about the air of a knightly family engaging in training. Elena reminded her brother that he had never cared about such matters before. She also recalled that he had once declared their father to be annoying and expressed eagerness to assume the role of lord. Jizlain was shocked to hear his own words repeated back to him. Smiling brightly, Elena remarked that she liked the changes she observed in him, adding that it felt as though he had returned to his former self. Ghislain reflected on the past week, realizing that his recent actions had begun to reshape both his reception by others and his future prospects. While Ghislain was deep in thought, he noticed Belinda giving instructions to Elena's bodyguards. She directed them to resolve any issues caused by Ghislain independently, emphasizing the importance of avoiding problems, especially with so many visitors around. Despite the overall consistency in events, Ghislain found it challenging to measure the impact of his actions on smaller occurrences. Utilizing the information available to him effectively became a priority for Ghislain, who knew he needed to respond appropriately to each situation. Ghislain accompanied his sister throughout the festival, carefully observing their surroundings for any suspicious behavior. After some time, Elena sat down and commented that she had enjoyed the festival a little, though she found it repetitive and wondered if there was anything new this year. Ghislain found it peculiar that nothing unexpected had occurred, speculating that his presence might have deterred any incidents. While pondering this, a soldier approached Elena and suggested visiting other areas where new events were reportedly taking place. The soldier explained that his friend had mentioned these events, inviting Elena to join him. Surprised, Elena grasped the soldier's hand, expressing excitement about the possibility of fun activities. As Ghislain observed, he realized that the two soldiers accompanying them, Jamal and Philip, were traitors. He struggled to comprehend how these men, once the most trusted knights of their household, protectors of Elena since childhood, could betray them. They had, famously, sacrificed themselves defending her in the past. With a smile, Jamal welcomed Elena to the supposed event. To her astonishment, the area was desolate, uncamp-like. She questioned Jamal. He nervously replied preparations were delayed, attendees would arrive soon. Elena, assuming he was joking, teased him about performing in such a shabby location. As the conversation continued, Ghislain surveyed the surroundings. Despite its abandoned appearance, escape routes were carefully blocked, premeditated. Elena, tugging at his arm, suggested leaving. Jamal urged her to stay, watch the performance. Elena refused, she had no interest in remaining. Ghislain playfully commented on his sister's strength. Before she could respond, Philip appeared, menacing. Elena, alarmed, accused the two of acting strangely. Jamal apologized, mentioning, with unsettling demeanor, a received request. 3 men entered, 2 in black, their leader in a blue coat and hat, Frank. He commended the traitors' efficiency. Jamal announced they'd delivered their mistress, their deal concluded. Frank noticed Ghislain, expressing dissatisfaction at his presence. Elena, nervously gripping her brother, held on tight as Jamal, smiling, declared Ghislain had foolishly followed them to his graveyard. Ghislain questioned Jamal's belief in escape after betrayal. Jamal, smug, dismissed the concern, suggesting Ghislain worry about himself. They would flee to a distant land, tired of the impoverished county, plagued by barbarian raids. Many others were leaving. As he spoke, Ghislain closed the distance, striking, slicing through Jamal's armor in a single blow. The sight stunned everyone. Jamal's body fell apart. Ghislain coldly remarked that those who left before never tried to sell out their own people. Turning to Philip, he demanded to know if he was wrong. Philip, seeing Elena, cursed Jamal, calling him an idiot. He expressed disbelief a knight could fall to an amateur. Before Philip could draw his sword, Ghislain hurled his blade, striking Philip's forehead, killing him instantly. Elena rushed to her brother's side. One man in black, still processing, asked Frank if the young man was truly Ghislain. Another commented on Ghislain's lack of combat experience or training. Frank confirmed their observations, though he admitted disbelief at Ghislain eliminating 2 knights so swiftly, using mana-infused strikes. Trembling, Elena asked Ghislain for explanation. He struck her neck, rendering her unconscious. Gently placing her on the ground, he told her to rest. Frank, watching, thanked Ghislain for simplifying their task. Ghislain was far more formidable than expected. They'd intended to deal with Jamal and Philip themselves. Lighting a pipe, Frank inquired whether Ghislain had been concealing his abilities. Ghislain retrieved his sword, asking why Frank was so interested in his skills. He dismissed the men in black as insignificant threats. Frank, however, was different. The mana he exuded was on a completely different level. Recognizing the danger, Ghislain resolved to finish quickly, releasing his mana, preparing a set of strings before engaging. He demanded to know who issued the order. Frank mockingly replied it was pointless for a dead man to know. Realizing they wouldn't give up the information willingly, Ghislain readied himself. The truth would soon come out regardless. One of Frank's subordinates asked if they should decapitate Ghislain. Frank ordered them to capture him alive, break all his bones, ensuring he would lose his sanity. Ghislain's screams of agony would make a perfect masterpiece. At Frank's command, the two men charged. Ghislain hurled a firecracker, causing one to falter. He closed in, delivering a fatal stab. The remaining subordinate scoffed. Calling it a cheap trick, Ghislain swiftly maneuvered, blocking the strike, striking the man's hand, severing his head. Frank launched a sudden attack. Ghislain deflected it with a second sword. Frank was stunned. Ghislain quickly shoved Frank's sword downward, rising to his feet, delivering a clean slash across Frank's neck, causing his pipe to fall. To Ghislain's astonishment, Frank retaliated, using mana to reinforce his neck. Frank admitted his surprise. He would have lost his neck if not for his concentrated mana. Ghislain realized the man had minimized the attack's damage. Frank adopted a combat stance, questioning the origin of Ghislain's swordsmanship. With a menacing smile, he promised Ghislain would meet his end here. Shoving Ghislain backward, Frank mocked his meager mana, confidently assuring him of defeat. However, Ghislain's smile in response unsettled Frank. Puzzled, Frank hesitated, giving Ghislain the opportunity to parry his sword and disrupt his balance. Ghislain followed up with a swift kick to Frank's face, forcing him to retreat and wipe the blood from his mouth. Frank smirked and reminded Ghislain that such attacks were futile against his reinforced mana. Yet moments later, Frank coughed violently and collapsed to his knees, bewildered by the unexpected potency of Ghislain's attack. He struggled to process how Ghislain's seemingly low mana could bypass his enhancements. Ghislain slowly approached, revealing he had suspected someone of orchestrating his sister's demise but never imagined the true culprit. With a piercing gaze, Ghislain unleashed his third core, dramatically amplifying his mana. Frank, visibly shaken, was unable to react before Ghislain appeared directly in front of him, moving at a speed his eyes could hardly track. Ghislain's attacks came fiercely and relentlessly, each strike heavier than the last. Despite his best efforts, Frank's arms grew numb under the barrage, and his sword was nearing its breaking point. Frank tried to regain his footing, reminding himself that excessive mana bursts typically had limited effects. However, Ghislain's surge defied his understanding. It was as if the young man had transformed entirely. Noticing Frank's faltering defense, Ghislain shattered the assassin's weapon with a decisive strike. Without hesitation, he followed through with a heavy blow to Frank's body, driving his sword deep into the assassin's torso. Frank cried out in agony, but Ghislain silenced him by gripping his throat and pinning him against the wall, keeping his blade embedded. Ghislain demanded answers, insisting that Frank reveal who had ordered the assassination. Refusing to cooperate, Frank produced a hidden blade and vowed to take Elena with him, unwilling to go down without inflicting further harm. Before he could act, strings wrapped tightly around his wrist, halting his movement. Ghislain, controlling the strings, warned Frank against making any rash decisions. With a cold, unwavering stare, he proposed a deal, promising to sheath his sword if Frank complied and refrained from further resistance. Frank was stunned to realize that the threads binding him were made with mana. He could not fathom when Ghislain had managed to create such a tool with calculated precision. Ghislain drove his sword deeper into Frank's body, remarking that someone of Frank's caliber should be able to patch up the injury. His voice carried a chilling tone as he warned that no amount of skill would matter once Frank's mana core was destroyed. Panic flickered in Frank's eyes as he glanced down to see Ghislain's sword glowing ominously. The assassin screamed as he felt his mana core cracking uncontrollably, shouting at Ghislain and accusing him of madness. He warned that the backflow could cause a catastrophic explosion, obliterating the entire area, and questioned whether Ghislain intended to self-destruct. With an unflinching gaze, Ghislain coldly replied that only the unskilled made such mistakes and assured Frank he had complete control. Frank was unnerved by Ghislain's expression and realized he wasn't bluffing. Accepting his impending death, Frank screamed and revealed that Count Desmond had orchestrated the assassination. The Count, he explained, sought a pretext to ignite a war against the per diem endeared families. Ghislain was taken aback by this revelation. In his previous life, such schemes were typically carried out by families allied with Duke Delini. It infuriated him to see the Duke pulling strings from behind the scenes while remaining uninvolved. Ghislain demanded to know if this was why Frank had targeted his sister. Frank confirmed it with a grim smile. Without hesitation, Ghislain drove his sword through the assassin's body, causing Frank to cough up blood. Frank reminded him of his earlier promise to put the sword away. Ghislain smirked and asked why Frank, who had taken so many lives, was now afraid of death. Frank began to laugh, catching Ghislain off guard. Moving closer, Frank declared that his death would change nothing. The Dard family's mission was already accomplished, and Param was destined to fall into ruin. He sneered, questioning whether anyone would listen to someone like Ghislain. As Frank taunted him, Ghislain grabbed the assassin's head and slammed it against the wall. With a sinister smile, Ghislain declared that his rebirth after death meant everything would be different this time. His sword began to glow brighter, and Frank's screams echoed through the air. A burst of energy erupted from Frank's mouth and exploded in the sky like fireworks. Moments later, the assassin's lifeless body crumpled to the ground. Ghislain, breathing heavily, surveyed the scene. The bodies scattered around and his unconscious sister sleeping peacefully confirmed the carnage. Satisfied that no one else was nearby, he discarded his sword, took a deep breath, and collapsed to his knees, coughing up blood. Wiping his mouth, Ghislain muttered that detonating 3 mana cores had once been effortless for him. As the mercenary king steeled himself, he rose and vowed not to fall here. Heading to a nearby building, he kicked the door open and found 2 bodies inside. In his previous life, a 3rd body had been discovered here alongside Alina's. This time, based on Frank's earlier words, Ghislain identified one of the deceased as a son of the Degard family. The boy had been murdered alongside his escort knight, their deaths staged to frame Elena as the killer. Aware that revealing the bodies would almost certainly spark a war, Ghislain decided to eliminate all evidence. He took out a firecracker and set the building ablaze. With the flames consuming the damning proof, Ghislain carried his sister and began walking away, determined. He promised himself that his enemies would never succeed in their plans. Unbeknownst to Ghislain, a figure hidden in the trees observed his every move. After watching for a moment, the person disappeared into the shadows. The scene shifted to a round table where the observer reported the assassination's failure to a group of superiors. The council members were visibly shaken, unable to comprehend how Frank and the 2 knights had failed their mission. They questioned the spy, accusing him of underestimating the mission and assuming it would be easy. Nervously, the spy admitted their failure was due to Jizlain. This revelation shocked the men. They found it hard to believe that the so-called useless bastard of the North could accomplish anything significant. One member dismissed Brandon Jizlain as a worthless failure, demanding the spy stop using him as a scapegoat. The spy, however, insisted that Jizlain was nothing like the reports and rumors suggested. Recalling how Jizlain had dealt with their men, he explained that Jizlain seemed like an entirely different person. The spy reassured his superiors that their plans to eliminate the Degard family were still intact and that starting a territorial war wouldn't be difficult. Pleading for another opportunity, he promised to rectify his failure. The council members, unimpressed, silenced him, berating him for his inability to gather adequate intelligence on a single individual. They condemned him for delaying their plans and were outraged that he dared request another chance after his failure. The group ultimately decided to eliminate the spy. However, before the order was carried out, a man seated on a throne intervened, his voice cutting through the noise. He dismissed the commotion as tiresome and asked the spy to explain the kind of chance he was requesting. The spy confidently assured the man that he could eliminate Jizlain. When asked how, the spy proposed orchestrating a duel. He explained that he had someone in mind for the task. The council demanded to know the individual's identity, and the spy revealed his choice, Cain Lois. Famous for his strength-based swordsmanship, Cain, despite his young age, was regarded as a paragon of raw power. The spy argued that no one in the north could rival Cain's strength and assured the council that arranging a duel would be easy, since Cain was Jizlain's cousin. The man on the throne, fixing the spy with a cold gaze, warned that there would be no further chances if he failed again. The scene shifted to the training hall of the Param household. Fergus entered, announcing to his master that it was time for a meal. As soon as he spoke, something flew toward him. Jizlain, practicing with his mana threads, had wrapped a thread around a sword near the entrance and pulled it toward himself, carefully observing his own movements. He tested the threads, handling, swinging the sword as he fine-tuned his control. Fergus approached, apologizing for interrupting the training session and asking his master how he had managed to pull the sword. Jizlain showed him the mana thread, explaining that it was a technique for manipulating mana as a string. He recounted that in his past life he had relied on this method extensively. However, in his current state, his limited mana reserves required him to implode his core to use the technique effectively. Ghislain noted that his lack of mana now restricted him to creating fewer threads. Fergus, visibly impressed, admitted that he had never seen such a technique before. Despite believing himself to be well trained in mana manipulation, he was puzzled by how Jizlain, whom he had considered unskilled and untrained, could master such an advanced method. Noticing Fergus's lingering presence, Jizlain asked if there was something he needed. He bowed his head and expressed gratitude to Jizlain for protecting his younger sister. Surprised by the old man's gesture, Ghislain replied that he had simply done what was necessary and invited Fergus to join him for a meal. A day later, the festival was temporarily halted, as expected. After the incident involving the knight's attempt to traffic the young lady inside the castle, Elena voiced her frustration to her brother, lamenting that no one believed her when she said he had saved her. She urged Ghislain to speak up and set the record straight. Ghislain assured her it wasn't necessary, adding that no one would believe him either. Belinda, overhearing the conversation, was visibly irritated. She expressed her disgust at Jamal and Philly, declaring that she always suspected the two knights were perverts and accusing them of trying to take Elena for their own gain. Meanwhile, Jizlain found relief in knowing that his sister had survived the ordeal while he had managed to prevent a war from breaking out. He was acutely aware that their enemies would not give up so easily. Realizing he couldn't face these threats alone indefinitely, Jizlain concluded that he needed to establish his own military force. As he pondered his next steps, a maid entered the room, pushing a cart laden with food. She set a plate in front of him, and when Jizlain uncovered it, he found only a single slice of bread. Startled, Jizlain turned to Belinda and asked when they would be having dessert. The maid, astonished by his question, asked if he was truly unaware of their dire circumstances. Before Jizlain could respond, shouting from outside the castle caught his attention. He froze momentarily, startled by the commotion at the castle gates. A portly, bearded man was demanding compensation from the Parham household for the losses incurred by the abrupt cancellation of the festival. He was not alone, other men had joined him, brandishing pitchforks and voicing similar demands. They called for Ghislain and Elena to come out, accusing them of wasting the county's money. The guards pleaded with the crowd to remain calm. Ghislain peered out the window to assess the situation but struggled to understand the root of the unrest. Belinda, standing nearby, explained the context. She informed him that the county's economy heavily depended on merchants who thrived on the profits generated by the annual festival. While last year's festival had been profitable, this year's premature cancellation left many merchants struggling, and their anger was understandable. Ghislain was taken aback by the revelation, having not realized the county's financial state was so precarious. Recognizing the potential danger if the merchants' frustrations escalated, he resolved to intervene. He turned to Fergus and inquired about the soldiers' current actions, instructing him to deploy them to calm the crowd. Fergus, however, revealed that there were no soldiers available. Ghislain was stunned by this news, prompting Fergus to explain that most of their forces had been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters for reconstruction efforts following an orc raid. Frustration etched on his face, Ghislain absorbed the reality of their situation. Per Diem was caught in an unending struggle, sandwiched between barbarian incursions from the north and the looming threat of monsters from the forest on the county's other side. Ghislain struggled to grasp the reality of their dire situation: no money and no soldiers. He pulled Belinda aside and reminded her that she was responsible for managing his finances. He asked her to use whatever funds he had left to calm the merchants. Belinda, visibly surprised, informed him that he had no money remaining. Stunned, Ghislain demanded an explanation. Belinda reminded him that the Count had cut off his allowance due to his past extravagance, spending money recklessly. Realizing he was broke, Ghislain pleaded with Belinda to lend him some funds, but she admitted she had no cash either. The scene shifted to Ghislain staring out the window at the town below, his thoughts racing. He couldn't believe his family was in such a precarious state. Without money, even his knowledge of the future seemed useless. Ghislain began to consider whether anything in the state could change their fortunes. As he pondered, Ricardo burst into the room, breathing heavily. Startled, Ghislain asked him why he was in such a hurry. Ricardo, visibly distressed, informed him that there was a problem. Cain wanted to see him. The mention of Cain shocked Ghislain. The scene shifted again to Scovin, who was struggling to remain standing. His face was bruised, and his opponent struck him once more, landing a blow so forceful it pierced his chest plate and left him sprawled on the ground at the entrance to the tavern. Ghislain arrived just in time to witness the commander's collapse. Scovin, noticing his young master, called out weakly. Ghislain, irritated by the sight, turned his attention to Cain, who greeted him with a wide smile. Standing before Ghislain was a massive young man, Cain Loges, heir to Loges County. Ghislain recognized his cousin immediately, recalling that Cain had always been both his friend and rival. As Cain ascended the stairs, Ghislain asked Ricardo for an explanation. Ricardo revealed that he and Scoven had come to the tavern to investigate reports of a disturbance. Upon arrival, they encountered Cain and his escort knight. Recognizing them, Cain questioned the rumors he had heard about Ghislain. Scoven attempted to explain the details, but Cain silenced him by grabbing his jaw with a sinister smile. Cain accused Scoven of lying to the heir of Loges County before proceeding to beat him. He then asked Ricardo to recount the story properly. According to Cain, the rumors suggested that Ghislain, despite never training, had taken down an orc with his bare hands and single-handedly dealt with traitorous knights. Mocking the tale, Cain claimed he was merely giving the commander a wake-up call to knock some sense into him. Cain then turned his attention to Ghislain, accusing him of being the root of the situation. He sneered, claiming that none of this would have happened if Ghislain hadn't lied. Ghislain immediately remembered Cain's behavior, recalling how his arrogant cousin had always treated him like a subordinate. Every time Cain visited Per Diem, he caused trouble, yet no one dared confront him because of his high status. Cain's bold demeanor and confidence were celebrated as qualities befitting an heir, while Ghislain's insecurities and perceived weaknesses drew criticism. Unexpectedly, Ghislain smiled at the memory. Cain, startled, hadn't anticipated such a reaction. Normally, Ghislain would have charged at him after such blatant provocation. A few hours earlier in Loges County, a spy had approached Cain with a request to kill Ghislain. Cain was initially shocked but listened as the spy assured him that the esteemed one would support his family if he succeeded. Cain admitted that dealing with Ghislain wouldn't be difficult, but killing the heir of a county was another matter entirely. He asked how such an act could be executed without causing scandal. The spy explained that they could lure Ghislain into a duel and stage his death as an unfortunate accident. The spy assured Cain that the duel could be made to look like a trivial dispute between heirs. With a smile, he reminded Cain that this was a rare opportunity, even for someone like him. Grinning, Cain expressed disbelief that he now had a chance to kill his own cousin. With growing enthusiasm, he urged the spy to leave with him immediately. At that moment, Cain pondered why the mysterious organization might want to eliminate Ghislain. He suspected that something about his cousin had changed. Smiling at the thought, Cain asked Ghislain why he was simply standing there, sitting casually on the stairs. He demanded Ghislain bring whatever he had prepared for him. Ghislain, puzzled, asked Cain what he meant. Cain explained that he had heard about the festival's interruption and insisted they liven things up and enjoy themselves. He reminded Ghislain that they always worked well together on such things, and with a menacing expression, he asked if he was wrong. Unbothered by Cain's intimidating demeanor, Ghislain took a moment to reflect, and then understanding dawned on him. Cain was talking about alcohol and women, things Ghislain had been forced to arrange for him during his past visits. Back then, Ghislain had complied to avoid being beaten up by his larger, stronger cousin. Those demands had drained Ghislain's funds, and he now understood Belinda's reminder that his father had cut him off for spending recklessly. As these memories resurfaced, Ghislain smiled, realizing the solution to his current financial problem had been in front of him all along. Snapping back to reality as Cain called out again, Ghislain assured his cousin he would bring what was needed soon. However, with a sharp look in his eyes, he informed Cain that there was a debt to settle first. The spy, observing from the side, was startled by the shift in Ghislain's demeanor. Confused, Cain asked what Ghislain was talking about. Ghislain explained with a calm smile that all the extravagant arrangements Cain had enjoyed were paid for out of his own pocket. Now, he demanded repayment, 10,000 gold to be precise. Cain, taken aback, protested that the expenses couldn't have exceeded 100 gold. He claimed that the money was merely a friendship fee given out of appreciation for Cain's companionship. With a smirk, Ghislain warned Cain to repay him immediately or face a beating. The tavern fell silent as onlookers gawked at Ghislain's boldness. Cain's side stood and accused Ghislain of acting out because he had been lenient with him. He dismissed the idea that Ghislain had grown stronger and accused him of spreading false rumors about defeating knights. With those words, Cain clenched his fist and demanded Ghislain pull himself together. Without further warning, Cain launched an attack. Ghislain easily sidestepped, dodging the blow. Both Cain and the bystanders, including Ricardo and the spy, were visibly stunned. Growing more agitated, Cain swung again, this time aiming for Ghislain's head. Ghislain ducked, moved low, and delivered a swift punch to Cain's ribs. Cain recoiled in pain, shocked to feel the force of the blow. Ghislain swung a punch toward Cain's head, but Cain managed to block it with his hand. Though he smiled at successfully blocking the attack, Cain immediately fell to his knees, screaming in pain. The spy rushed to his side, asking if Cain was all right. Jizlain, unimpressed, told Cain to stop whining, pointing out that he had blocked the attack. The spy quickly turned on Jizlain, demanding that he stay away from Cain. The tavern fell silent, the crowd stunned by the sight of Cain, the seemingly unbeatable air, brought low by Jizlain. Jizlain observed the situation, quickly deducing Cain's intentions. Whispering to the spy, he asked if his acting had been convincing. With a sly smile, the spy assured him it was perfect, explaining that the stage was now set to paint Jizlain as the aggressor. Determined to leave a lasting impression, Cain pulled a blue glove from his pocket. He raised it high and declared that Jizlain had disgraced the nobility with lies, accusing him of attacking without provocation. Before Cain could finish his speech, Jizlain hurled his glove at him, cutting off his words. Jizlain challenged his cousin to a duel, leaving Cain momentarily shocked. Jizlain pointed out that Cain had insulted him as an heir and assaulted his knight, accusing him of tarnishing the dignity of the nobility. With a calm smile, Jizlain asked if Cain intended to deny the allegations. Regaining his composure, Cain smirked. He had always believed Jizlain to be foolish, but he hadn't expected him to dig his own grave so thoroughly. Drawing his sword, Cain accepted the challenge, vowing that Jizlain would regret it, even if it cost him his life. Jizlain called out to Ricardo, who promptly responded. Jizlain instructed him to bring the merchants protesting outside the castle. Ricardo, taken aback, hesitated, but Jizlain, now smiling with a hint of madness, assured him it would help them make a great deal of money. While the cancellation of the festival had left merchants and tourists frustrated, Jizlain believed an event like this would be enough to rekindle their excitement and soothe tensions. The scene shifted to a stage surrounded by an eager crowd. Jizlain and Cain stood ready to duel, their confrontation attracting a throng of spectators. Many were thrilled at the prospect of Jizlain's humiliation. The excitement reinvigorated the town, with merchants reopening their stalls to sell goods to tourists. Among the crowd, a chubby merchant shouted for bets to be placed, certain Cain's victory was inevitable. The merchants, confident in Cain's dominance, bet heavily in his favor. Cain rested his massive sword on the ground and questioned why Jizlain had turned a sacred duel into a marketplace spectacle. With a sinister grin, he warned that his sword wouldn't stop even if Jizlain surrendered. Jizlain, unfazed, replied that enough people had gathered, signaling the start of the duel. Just as the fight was about to commence, the spy interjected, claiming that a proper bet couldn't proceed. The chubby merchant revealed to the crowd that no one had bet on Jizlain, a fact that surprised no one. Many believed that betting on him would be foolish given the apparent outcome. Cain mocked Jizlain, laughing that even his own people didn't trust him. The chubby merchant suggested altering the bet to predict how long Jizlain would last against Cain. At that moment, Scoven, supported by Ricardo, stepped forward and placed a bag of gold on the table. He declared his bet on Jizlain, shocking the crowd. Following him, Elena approached and dropped an even larger bag of gold. She announced her intention to bet on her brother, surprising even Jizlain. When asked if the amount was sufficient, the merchant confirmed it was. Cain, irritated by the delay, demanded the duel begin. The referee signaled the start of the fight. Jizlain reminded Cain that, as his elder cousin, it would look strange for him to make the first move. This statement confused Cain, who responded that it was far too late for Jizlain to act like an older brother. As the referee gave the command, Cain leapt forward, using his momentum to swing his heavy sword at Jizlain. He managed to block the attack but was surprised by the sheer weight of the blade. Cain, smiling arrogantly, taunted Jizlain, saying he had stooped too low to act like an elder sibling. Using the hilt of his sword, Cain shoved Jizlain back and immediately followed up by swinging the hilt toward Jizlain's head. Jizlain dodged Cain's attack by ducking low, but Cain immediately followed up with a powerful kick. Although Jizlain evaded the strike, the force of Cain's leg shattered the ground beneath them. It was clear that Cain wasn't giving Jizlain even a moment to counterattack. With a cocky grin, Cain reveled in his own power. Jizlain noted his cousin's pride, but the sight did not intimidate him. Belinda, however, began to panic after witnessing Cain's display. She clutched Elena's arm and urged her to stop the fight. Nearby, the spy smiled knowingly, confident that it was already too late. He understood Cain's strategy well. His overwhelming strength and relentless attacks would force any opponent to focus solely on evasion. Exhaustion would eventually leave them vulnerable, and Cain would seize that moment to end the fight. It was a strategy Cain had perfected, and he had always emerged victorious this way. As Cain's attacks became more aggressive, Ghislain continued to dodge, displaying surprising agility. Cain, noticing this, remarked that his cousin was as slippery as ever. He acknowledged that Ghislain's skills had improved since their last encounter. Switching tactics, Cain grabbed his sword by the blade and swung the hilt at Ghislain. He mocked his cousin, claiming that Ghislain had always been good at running away since they were children. Ghislain managed to block the attack with his sword, but Cain used the hilt to grab and toss him into the air. The crowd watched in stunned silence, assuming this was the end for Ghislain. The spy smirked, convinced of Cain's victory. As Ghislain descended, he calmly muttered that he had wanted to go easy on Cain. Unfortunately, Cain had crossed the line. Gathering mana into his legs, Ghislain controlled his landing and immediately charged at his cousin. Cain was caught off guard by Ghislain's sudden burst of speed and gasped in pain as Ghislain's blade struck his stomach. The spy, stunned, realized that Ghislain had condensed mana into his legs to regain stability and move swiftly. Ghislain chastised Cain, calling his swordsmanship ignorant. He accused Cain of believing he was invincible simply because his opponents cowered at his displays of strength. Taking a stance, Ghislain declared that he would open Cain's eyes. Enraged, Cain rushed forward with his sword. Ghislain countered by kicking the blade to push Cain back. Before Cain could recover, Ghislain leapt to the side, avoiding the weapon and delivering a precise strike down Cain's shoulder to his hand. As Cain thrust his sword forward in retaliation, Ghislain sidestepped and pressed the blade laid down with his foot. Capitalizing on the moment, Ghislain landed a near-fatal cut close to Cain's neck. Blood trickled from the shallow wounds Ghislain had inflicted earlier, shocking the audience into silence before cheers erupted. No one had expected Ghislain to display such skill. Many in the crowd began regretting their bets on Cain, while Elena gleefully pointed out the turn of events to Belinda. The spy smiled as he watched. While Cain, noticing his wounds, realized they were shallow, he deduced that Ghislain could have inflicted far greater harm but had deliberately held back. Confusion clouded Cain's mind as he failed to comprehend how his cousin had attained such a level of swordsmanship. Ghislain glared at his cousin and tossed his sword aside, to the astonishment of everyone present. He declared that the gap in their skill was too great to entertain the crowd. Turning to Cain, Ghislain stated that he would fight him barehanded. Cain, now visibly irritated, demanded an explanation. Ghislain clarified to Cain that his skills in swordsmanship were superior and suggested providing a handicap. He proposed that they engage in a barehanded fight. With a serious expression, Ghislain declared his intention to double the original bet by adding 1,000 gold, asserting that he was confident in his victory. The crowd reacted with shock at the unexpected escalation, unable to fathom Ghislain's boldness in increasing the stakes. Among them, the spy was the most astonished. He struggled to believe that Ghislain had the audacity to challenge Cain to a bare-handed fight. Nonetheless, the man felt elated, convinced that Ghislain's recklessness had handed him an advantage. As preparations for the fight commenced, the chubby merchant invited spectators to place their additional bets, announcing the switch to a bare-handed contest between Ghislain and Cain. Opinions were divided. Some considered Ghislain foolish for challenging Cain to a test of sheer strength, while others believed he had a strategy and chose to bet on him. Cain was incredulous at his cousin's decision to face him bare-handed. After a moment of hesitation, he instructed Ghislain to proceed as he wished, discarding his coat and readying his weapon. Lifting his sword, Cain proclaimed his intention to use it, charging at Ghislain immediately. Belinda, observing this, expressed her frustration and urged her master to retrieve his weapon and defeat Cain. As these words left her lips, Cain swung his sword at Ghislain with lethal intent. However, Ghislain evaded the attack, smiling as he determined that his cousin required a lesson. Dodging Cain's strike, Ghislain dropped to the ground, avoiding the blade. Cain attempted to redirect his sword, but Ghislain maneuvered to his side and delivered a punch to Cain's thigh. Before Cain could react, a heavy blow landed on his jaw, causing him to lose his balance and collapse. Cain was left bewildered, unable to comprehend how Ghislain, whom he had always regarded as inferior, could execute such precise movements. The crowd erupted in astonishment as they began to perceive the possibility of Ghislain emerging victorious. With a calm but stern demeanor, Ghislain demanded that Cain rise, declaring that he had barely begun. Infuriated by his cousin's words, Cain lunged again, wielding his sword with ferocity. He swung the blade wildly as he closed the distance between them, but Ghislain skillfully evaded each strike. Seizing an opening, Ghislain grabbed Cain's arm, twisted it, and locked him down. Before Cain could retaliate, Ghislain delivered a knee strike to his ribs, causing him to spit blood. Disoriented and unable to reconcile the situation, Cain struggled to process how someone he had always regarded as subservient could dominate him so thoroughly. Despite his injuries, Cain clung to the belief that defeating Jizlain should have been a simple matter, one that would secure his family's future. However, Jizlain offered no respite. He pressed his advantage relentlessly, raining blows on Cain without pause, leaving no room for recovery. By the time Jizlain ceased his relentless assault, Cain's face and entire body were swollen. The boy trembled before Jizlain, who grabbed him by the hair and expressed pity for his father. Jizlain explained that Count Loges had once supported Per Diem tirelessly, even to the brink of ruin, simply out of loyalty and friendship with Jizlain's father. However, Cain, unlike his father, had chosen a different path. As these words sank in, Cain recalled a moment from a few years prior. In that memory, Cain had argued with his father, frustrated by the Count's decision to continue aiding Per Diem. Cain could not comprehend why his father wanted to send more support when their own county was struggling. He had likened the effort to pouring water into a cracked bucket and reminded his father that it had been less than a week since he had returned, only to prepare to leave for Per Diem once again. Pleading, Cain asked him to stay, pointing out that everyone needed him. Count Loges, however, turned and firmly explained that his actions were driven by his friendship with Count Per Diem. As Cain recalled this conversation, his focus returned to the present, just in time to see Jizlain's fist approaching his face. Cain closed his eyes, bracing for the blow. Instead, Jizlain stopped and told his cousin that enough had been done. When Cain opened his eyes, he saw Jizlain extending a hand toward him, inviting him to rise. Cain, overwhelmed, lowered his head and admitted his defeat. The crowd erupted in disbelief, chanting Jizlain's name, marveling at his unexpected victory. Those who had bet on Cain regretted their decision, while others celebrated their winnings from wagering on Jizlain. Among the spectators, Elena beamed with pride at her brother's success. Meanwhile, Belinda and the two soldiers accompanying her stood in stunned silence, shocked by the outcome. The spy climbed onto the stage, visibly enraged. Approaching Cain, he shouted, demanding to know why he had surrendered so easily after showing only a slight disadvantage. The spy reminded Cain of the trust placed in him, but Cain merely responded that he was finished and insisted it was time to leave. Infuriated by Cain's perceived weakness, the spy stewed in frustration. While the spy brooded, Jizlain called out to him with a confident smile. Addressing the crowd, Jizlain announced that the spy had volunteered to cover the cost of meat and drinks for everyone present. Cheers erupted as the crowd celebrated their young master's generosity, declaring him the best. The spy, however, was stunned and protested, insisting that he had made no such offer. Jizlain placed a firm hand on the man's shoulder and calmly explained that this was the price of losing the duel. He reassured the spy that the expenses would not be deducted from the betting pot but rather an additional contribution expected from him. As Jizlain tightened his grip on the spy's shoulder, he reminded the man of the terms of the bet, which now included an additional 1,000 gold on top of the initial 1,000. With a chilling look, Jizlain warned the spy of the consequences of attempting to flee. Recognizing the severity of the situation, the spy dropped to his knees in defeat, agreeing to Jizlain's demands. He understood that disobedience would only lead to his demise. The following day, the scene shifts to Jizlain's room. He placed a large box on the table, opening it to reveal an impressive quantity of gold coins, profits from his recent bet. Jizlain was astonished at the amount, realizing it was enough to hire a small mercenary corps. Closing the box, he acknowledged the difficulty of accumulating such wealth again and the urgency of his circumstances. While contemplating, Jizlain noticed Elena and Belinda standing nearby with a nervous expression. He asked if something was wrong. Elena, smiling brightly, inquired how her brother intended to spend his newfound wealth. Jizlain jokingly asked if she wanted some of it, but Elena clarified that she was merely curious. Belinda interjected confidently, stating that she already knew Jizlain's intentions. She reminded him that Lady Amelia's birthday was approaching and teased that he had orchestrated the entire display to purchase an extravagant gift for Amelia. Elena, surprised, questioned whether her brother was truly working so hard to impress his fiancée. Jizlain, startled, seemed unaware of having a fiancée. He asked his sister for clarification. Belinda, amused, urged him to stop pretending and assured him there was no need to feign ignorance out of embarrassment. Elena then reminded Jizlain that they were referring to Amelia from Rayfold County. Hearing the county's name, Jizlain's expression darkened. He recalled Amelia Rayfold vividly, likening her to a spider. Amelia Rayfold, a noble admired for her kindness and selfless actions, had won the unwavering support of her territory's people. However, in time, aligning with the Delini die to deal a decisive blow to Perdium's downfall, Ghislain viewed her as a traitor. A faint smile crossed his face as he asked Belinda when their father was expected to return. Belinda informed him that the Lord would arrive in a week. Ghislain determined that this timeframe was sufficient. Rising from his seat, he announced his intention to visit Rayfold County. Belinda, surprised, pointed out that it was not yet Amelia's birthday and asked about the reason for his visit. Ghislain revealed that he intended to secure funds from the county. The narrative transitions to a beautiful noblewoman placing her shoes on the ground. The woman, adorned with a spider near her mouth and striking red eyes, was revealed to be Amelia. She handed her shoes to a ragged girl nearby. The child, overwhelmed, struggled to believe that Amelia was gifting her the shoes. Amelia remarked that she alone deserved to walk barefoot on the land. Turning to her soldiers, she instructed them to provide food and shelter to the surrounding people. Her men immediately set about distributing provisions, leaving the crowd astonished as Amelia departed. The people expressed their gratitude for her kindness. The scene shifts again, now to Amelia's garden at the Rayfold Manor. A man knelt, cleaning Amelia's feet. This man, Bernarf, served as Amelia's escort knight. While stroking a cat on the table, Amelia recounted her father's insistence on absolute obedience from the people of their territory. She observed that the common folk would follow anyone who kept them warm and fed. Bernard complimented Amelia's strategy, assuring her that winning the hearts of the people would benefit her in the competition to determine her father's successor. In response, Amelia struck Bernard's face lightly with her foot. She then demanded an update on the duel involving the finest swordsman of the north. Bernard apologized and explained that he had avoided participating to prevent drawing undue attention, reasoning that such attention could disrupt their plans. Bernard reminded Amelia that the time had not yet come for her to reveal her claws. He kissed her feet, pledging his blade to her service. Amelia, with a calm yet commanding demeanor, reminded her knight that he was naturally her blade, as she had invested a great deal into his development. Lifting his head, she leaned closer, her expression darkening with an intimidating tone. She warned Bernard that weakness was unacceptable. Letting go of him, she shifted the conversation and inquired about the status of the merchants. Bernard reassured Amelia that there was no need to worry about the Arctium merchants. He explained that their guild was purchasing all the materials needed for the reconstruction of the Forest of the Outpost, recently destroyed in an orc attack on Perdium. Furthermore, he detailed how they were recovering the annual support funds sent by Count Rayfold to Perdium. While they spoke, a steward entered the garden, prompting Bernard to rise and confront him. In a stern voice, he demanded to know who had allowed the interruption. The steward, unfazed, explained that news had arrived from the gate. Jizlain had come to visit. Amelia, surprised by this revelation, questioned the steward about the purpose of Jizlain's visit. The man relayed that Jizlain claimed to have matters to discuss concerning their merchant guild. Both Amelia and Bernard were startled by this unexpected development. The scene transitioned to the visitor's room where Amelia entered and took a seat. Across from her sat Jizlain, dressed in a rough coat and holding a small flower. Jizlain greeted her cordially, but Amelia expressed her disapproval of his unannounced visit. She reprimanded him for his lack of etiquette and manners. Smiling, Jizlain explained that he had come to present her with an early birthday gift. He placed the flower on the table, describing its pleasant fragrance and mentioning that he had acquired it from the nearby merchant guild. Jizlain added that he intended to purchase flowers from this guild moving forward, revealing its name as the Arctium Merchant Guild. Amelia listened but appeared perplexed by Jizlain's remarks. Rising from her seat, she claimed not to understand his point and dismissed herself, stating that she would leave now that she had received his gift. However, as she turned to depart, Jizlain, his gaze cold and unyielding, asked her to sit back down. The energy radiating from him startled Amelia. She froze momentarily, unable to reconcile the powerful presence before her with the timid young man she had once known, who could barely speak in her presence. Jizlain lifted the tea in front of him, addressing Amelia directly. He informed her that he had no intention of wasting her time and revealed his need for 10,000 gold. Amelia, taken aback, struggled to believe that Jizlain had appeared so suddenly only to request such a large sum of money. She questioned whether this request was sanctioned by his father, but Jizlain assured her that his father had no involvement in the matter and asked her to simply provide the money. With a calm demeanor, Jizlain poured the tea onto the floor. Smiling, he remarked that Amelia had never intended to marry him. The statement left her momentarily stunned. Ghislain continued, explaining that it would be disastrous for her if word spread about her secret efforts to build power, particularly in the midst of a fierce succession struggle. As he spoke, Amelia's cat leapt onto the table and growled at him. Amelia dismissed his remarks as a poor joke, but Ghislain assured her that her secret was safe with him, for now. Amelia smiled coldly and told Ghislain that such a scenario would never occur. Without hesitation, she called for Bernard. The knight entered the room promptly, placing a hand over his chest as he greeted Ghislain. Recognizing Bernard, Ghislain recalled him as a loyal companion to Amelia and a skilled swordsman capable of rivaling the finest swordsmen in the north. Ghislain addressed Amelia directly, warning her that his death would spark a war. He asked if she could truly handle the consequences. Unfazed, Amelia responded that if a ruffian barged in, caused chaos, and was subsequently killed by her escort knight, that would be the story the world would hear. Smiling, she ordered Bernard to kill Ghislain. The knight drew his sword without hesitation, and Ghislain realized he had no choice but to take the situation seriously. Placing a hand on his sword hilt, Ghislain prepared to fight him. Before he could act, Bernard smiled, catching Ghislain off guard. A sudden noise shattered the tension. A hidden assassin emerged from the armor of a knight stationed behind Ghislain. The assassin lunged for Ghislain's chair, but Ghislain swiftly jumped aside. As the attacker struggled to free his weapon, Ghislain delivered a powerful kick to his chest, sending him crashing through the window. Amelia and Bernard stood visibly stunned by the display. Turning to his hosts, Ghislain expressed disbelief at Amelia's feigned politeness while arranging a surprise attack. Picking up his sword, he sarcastically remarked on their poor hospitality. Without hesitation, he charged Bernard, swinging his weapon. The knight blocked it with a cold glare. Ghislain questioned whether Rayfold County had forgotten the principles of chivalry. Unfazed, Bernard offered a mocking apology, reminding him that it was Ghislain who arrived unannounced, disturbing his mistress. Seizing Ghislain's sword, Bernard locked it in his arms and declared that courtesy was wasted on someone like him. As Bernard moved to strike, Ghislain evaded with ease, leaping into the air and landing a fierce kick that forced Bernard back, creating distance. Bernard had heard rumors that Ghislain was all talk, lacking real skill, but the man before him was no novice. Observing the clash, Amelia demanded to know why her knight was fighting so conservatively. Angry, she ordered Bernard to bring her Ghislain's head, reminding him that fulfilling her commands defined him as her sword. Upon hearing this, Bernard assumed his stance and released his mana, daring Ghislain to come forward. Ghislain smirked at the absurdity of an escort knight giving him orders. Bernard, undeterred, replied that he was doing Ghislain a favor. He advanced in a blur, appearing before Ghislain in an instant. His sword swung with incredible speed, catching Ghislain off guard. Though Ghislain dodged, the blade grazed his face, leaving a shallow cut. Stunned by Bernard's speed and precision, Ghislain was quickly forced onto the defensive by a series of fierce attacks. Amelia, watching intently, was surprised and unsettled. She had not expected the weakling to match her knight so well. Ghislain blocked another strike, locking Bernard's sword in place and pushing his blade dangerously close to the knight's neck. Before he could land the decisive blow, Bernard skillfully pulled back. Ghislain recovered quickly, deflecting the strike and leaping back to create space. Observing the intensity, Bernard turned to Amelia and urged her to leave, stating he could no longer guarantee her safety. With a resolute expression, he declared he would now give his best. Ghislain, unfazed, smirked coldly. This was exactly what he wanted. It had been too long since he faced such an entertaining opponent. The narrative shifted to Amelia, who fled the room clutching her cat, anger simmering beneath her skin as she replayed the humiliation Ghislain had caused her. She questioned how he had learned about the merchant guild, suspecting someone close must have leaked the information. There was no other way he could know such sensitive details without inside help. As she ran, Amelia grudgingly accepted that the rumors of Ghislain slaying orcs and rescuing his younger sister from assassins were likely true, though she still believed much of his reputation was exaggerated or owed to luck. Turning a corner, Amelia expected to find the guards she had stationed there, but instead she came upon a shocking sight. Her guards lay unconscious on the ground, and a hooded woman stood calmly among them. The woman revealed herself as Belinda, the maid, smiling faintly as if recalling a long-past meeting. Amelia's shock gave way to suspicion, demanding an explanation, but before she could react further, Belinda moved with astonishing speed. She appeared beside Amelia, pressing a blade to her throat and commanding silence. Frozen in disbelief, Amelia's gaze caught the spider still clinging to her lips. Belinda's practiced fingers removed the creature effortlessly. She recounted overhearing Count Perdiem and Count Rayfold during the engagement ceremony, describing how Amelia's siblings had mocked her fascination with spiders, and how Amelia had raised them as instruments of revenge. Belinda questioned why Amelia still wore the spider, suggesting it might symbolize either overcoming trauma or defiance. Without waiting for an answer, she crushed the spider underfoot with a cold satisfaction, declaring it ill-suited to Amelia. With an unsettling calm, Belinda urged cooperation. The scene shifted back to the room where Ghislain and Bernath continued their fierce duel. Ghislain noticed a palpable change in the air. The overwhelming mana Bernath was now releasing shifted the bottle's tone. Bernath recalled Ghislain's earlier remarks about the fight being entertaining, dismissing him as a lowly mercenary unworthy of nobility, unlike his mistress. Ghislain countered sharply, reminding Bernath that he was only an escort knight and warning him not to question his noble status. Bernath launched a rapid series of attacks, pressing Ghislain with incredible speed. Despite his skill, Ghislain found blocking the strikes increasingly difficult. Bernath admonished him to uphold the dignity of nobility, his strikes growing more intense and relentless, pushing Ghislain further back and testing his endurance. Frustrated, Ghislain decided the fight had gone on long enough and tried to pierce Bernath's head with a decisive strike, only for Bernath to skillfully bend the sword aside and force him to retreat. In a swift counter, Bernath struck Ghislain's shoulder, but the knight had taken the hit deliberately, using the momentum to create an opening. Ghislain counterattacked, but Bernath blocked just in time and maintained a tight guard, locking swords and kicking Ghislain away. Bernath remarked silently on the difference between a true warrior and one who fought for mere entertainment. Despite the mounting pressure, the overwhelming aura, incredible speed, and relentless attacks, Ghislain found the battle exhilarating. Attempts to counter with close quarters grappling were quickly neutralized as Bernath deceptively locked their swords together, creating a stalemate. With Ghislain's mana reserves low, overcoming Bernath's superior strength seemed nearly impossible. The situation was dire, and Bernath held the upper hand. As Bernath charged again, Ghislain acknowledged that the fight needed to end swiftly. Drawing upon his third mana core, Ghislain unleashed a sudden explosive surge of power. Meeting Bernath's blade with this newfound strength, Ghislain forced the knight to his knees, disarming him with sheer force. Bernath froze, unable to comprehend how Ghislain had summoned such overwhelming mana mid-battle. Before Bernath could recover, Ghislain raised his sword to deliver a fatal blow. But at that moment, Amelia appeared nearby, fury etched across her face, commanding Ghislain to stop and take the 10,000 gold he had demanded, then leave immediately. Irritated, Ghislain lowered his sword and stepped back, remarking internally how much simpler it would have been if Amelia had paid when he had first asked politely. Belinda watched the scene unfold and noted to herself that Ghislain's actions had gone far beyond what could be called a lover's quarrel. Ghislain remained unfazed, considering it merely a difference in opinion. Approaching Amelia, he rested his sword on his shoulder, informing her in a calm yet firm tone that the fee had now doubled to 20,000 gold. Amelia's frustration erupted as she smashed a vase onto the floor, the crash echoing sharply through the room. Bernath stood beside her, bowing slightly as he silently acknowledged his failure. He explained that Jizlain was far stronger than the rumors suggested, admitting to having underestimated him. Bernath revealed that Jizlain had managed to release mana exceeding even that of an advanced level knight. Amelia's expression darkened, she grimly recognized that Jizlain had changed. When Bernath cautiously suggested reporting these developments to Duke Deli, Amelia's reaction was swift and fierce. She slapped him sharply, grabbing his shirt with a glare full of fury. She reprimanded him silently, questioning if he truly understood the terror Duke Deli inspired. Amelia explained that exposing the incident would bring ruin upon them all. The secret alliance with the Duke, formed without her father's knowledge, relied on a covert agreement. The Duke had promised to support her rebellion in exchange for her assistance in toppling Perdiem. Turning to Bernath with a resolute gaze, she declared that Jizlain must be eliminated, no matter the cost. Bernath accepted the directive without hesitation. Amelia then inquired about Jizlain's injuries. The knight explained that, though he had inflicted light wounds across Jizlain's body and a heavier one on his shoulder, Jizlain's explosive mana use would likely leave him weakened for some time. Bernath cautioned that knights from their own territory could not be deployed, as doing so would leave a dangerous trail. Amelia nodded in understanding and reminded him of the special group she had trained. Bernath immediately grasped her intent. She planned to deploy the Wild Cats, a cadre of war orphans, outcasts, and those without status. Only the most naturally talented in mana manipulation were chosen for this elite group. Amelia placed a flag on the map, marking a narrow ravine, the only passage between Rayfold territory and Perdium County. Its remote location and restrictive terrain made it ideal for discreet operations. Bernath vowed to prepare the wildcats as instructed. Amelia's expression was resolute as she vowed silently to repay Ghislain for the humiliation he had inflicted. The scene shifted to Ghislain, seated in a carriage, wrapping a cloth tightly around his injured arm. Lost in thought, his senses pricked with the nagging suspicion that Amelia was already planning her next move. Fergus, seated nearby, checked on him, but Ghislain assured him the cuts were shallow. Reflecting on the battle, Ghislain admitted to having pushed himself to his limits but was satisfied with the outcome. The 20,000 gold he had extorted from Amelia was enough to fund the foundational rebuilding of Perdium County, an amount equivalent to years of savings. Despite his earlier anger, Ghislain had decided against killing Amelia. Her death would have ignited a war his county could ill afford. Perdium was already struggling against the barbarian threat, making retreat the wiser choice for now. The burden of knowledge he possessed about the Aram Merchant Guild would weigh heavily on Amelia, and he intended to exploit that. As he donned his jacket, Belinda observed his confident demeanor and asked if events were unfolding according to plan. She reminded him of his earlier instructions, to subdue the guards at the first sign of fighting and to take Amelia hostage if she tried to flee. Ghislain clarified that he had entrusted those tasks to Fergus. Suddenly, a sharp wave of pain coursed through his body, forcing him to spit blood. Alarmed, Belinda and Fergus moved swiftly to his side. Ghislain recognized the agony as the recoil from using his third mana core. Belinda then took his hand and produced a large needle coated with mana. She noted that the flow of his mana was chaotic and unbalanced. Without hesitation, she applied the needle to various points on his hand. Ghislain was startled by the sensation, feeling something release deep within him. His tangled mana pathways opened slightly. This technique required an advanced understanding of mana manipulation, and Ghislain reflected on Belinda's unusual skills. Though brought into the family by his mother, her true identity remained a mystery. It was curious that someone so talented would serve as a maid in the countryside, but Ghislain dismissed the thought, reasoning that skilled individuals in his territory were invaluable, especially as greater challenges loomed. Belinda reassured Ghislain of her unwavering loyalty, promising to assist in any way he required. She then questioned why he had taken such a large sum from Amelia. Ghislain explained that he needed funds, and Amelia was the wealthiest person he knew. Both Fergus and Belinda reacted with shock. Belinda expressed disbelief that he had ended his engagement over money and warned that Count Rayfold would retaliate if he learned the truth. Ghislain remained unconcerned, confident Amelia would never report the incident to her father. He smiled, reminding Belinda of her earlier declaration of trust. Annoyed, Belinda demanded to know his intentions for the money, asserting she had taken risks alongside him. Ghislain revealed his plan, to use the funds to conquer the Forest of Beasts. Belinda was taken aback. Fergus expressed skepticism, reminding Ghislain that attempts to conquer the forest had failed since his great-grandfather's time. Ghislain then reminded Fergus of a request he had made before entering the castle. Fergus hesitated before revealing that the man Ghislain sought was at the designated location but unstable and not in his right mind. Ghislain dismissed these concerns, insisting that as long as the man was alive, he remained useful, and urged immediate departure. Belinda objected, urging her master to return home due to his physical condition. She warned he could not afford to wander in his current state. Ghislain countered that Amelia was unlikely to let them leave without trying to silence them. Acknowledging this, Belinda flexed her muscles confidently, reminding him of her combat skills. She also noted that Fergus, as a knight, would be an asset against any threats. Ghislain reassured Belinda of her reliability but clarified that the role he required went beyond her expertise. Smiling, he revealed they were en route to meet the vanguard he had in mind. The scene shifted as the group arrived at a weathered wooden house nestled deep within the forest. Belinda noted its abandoned appearance, though Fergus confirmed it was the correct address. When Ricardo knocked, the door opened to reveal a massive, disheveled man with long, unkempt hair. He eyed them suspiciously, demanding to know their purpose. Everyone but Ghislain recoiled at the man's rough appearance. Belinda leaned toward her master, whispering doubts about the man's suitability. He looked frail and unlikely to survive another day, let alone fight. The man dismissed Ghislain as a bored young aristocrat and turned to leave. But Ghislain called out to him, addressing him by name as the ex-captain of the Regressed Mercenaries. The man stopped abruptly, caught off guard. Ghislain turned sharply, his face showing a mix of surprise and caution. Jizlain responded with a calm smile, revealing that he had long wished to meet him. The rest of the group was stunned to discover that the seemingly destitute man before them was once the leader of the legendary Regressed Mercenaries, a feared band known for demanding mastery of nearly all weapons from its members. Though the mercenary group no longer existed, their valor and reputation were so renowned that even foreign knights recognized their name. Suddenly, Ghislain hurled an axe at Jizlain, the blade narrowly missing and slicing through Jizlain's jacket. Alarmed, the group drew their weapons and moved to protect their master. Ghislain's menacing glare demanded to know Jizlain's intentions. Belinda cautioned her master to step back, warning of Ghislain's instability, but Jizlain remained unfazed. Jizlain mentioned the disease known as eternal punishment, which caused Ghislain to freeze in shock. He revealed knowledge of a cure for the incurable illness afflicting Ghislain's daughter, describing the symptoms in detail: high fever, bloody coughing, and red spots shaped like flower petals. This declaration caught Ghislain's interest, and reluctantly he allowed them to enter the house. Inside, a girl's screams filled the air. Ghislain rushed to his daughter Rachel, who writhed in pain on the bed. Jizlain observed her condition and judged that it was not too late to act. He recalled that in his past life, he had sought Ghislain to recruit him, but by the time he arrived, Ghislain's daughter had already died and Ghislain had taken his own life. The bare, weapon-filled house was a testament to Ghislain's sacrifices in his desperate attempts to save Rachel. Rachel sobbed, pleading with her father to end her suffering. Jizlain prepared to begin treatment immediately, but Belinda urged him to leave, doubting his ability to cure the disease, long considered a divine punishment beyond human power. Jizlain brushed off her concerns and asserted his confidence in his cure. He reminded Belinda of her earlier promise to trust him, silencing her doubts momentarily. Jizlain handed Belinda a list of rare medicinal herbs and instructed her to procure them at once. Surprised by the unusual ingredients, Belinda quickly complied and returned with the supplies. Jizlain, drawing on his extensive knowledge, began preparing the remedy. The cure was surprisingly simple to make but required expensive components, with the fair's blessing being the most crucial and costly. The herbs were chopped finely, tightly packed into a bottle, covered with distilled alcohol, and shaken thoroughly before resting. Afterward, the remaining ingredients were added and stirred until combined, producing a glowing purple liquid. Jizlain handed the potion to Ghislain and instructed him to give it to his daughter. Driven by desperation, Ghislain fed the liquid to Rachel. Almost immediately, the red spots on her face began to fade, astonishing everyone present. The transformation was undeniable, and even Ghislain struggled to comprehend what he was witnessing. Jizlain explained that while divine power could enhance the body's vitality and help fight illness, it was not equivalent to a cure. Ghislain, trembling with emotion, grasped Jizlain's arms and asked if his daughter would truly recover. Jizlain reassured him that Rachel would be fully healed within months. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Ghislain bowed deeply, acknowledging that Jizlain must have come to this remote place with a purpose. He confessed that all he had left was his own body and pledged his loyalty, offering to serve Jizlain in any capacity, even as a dog. Jizlain firmly declined the offer of servitude, declaring that he sought not a slave or servant but the captain of the Regressed Mercenaries. Ghislain looked up and noticed a new fire in Jizlain's eyes, a dreamer's ambition. Inspired, he stood and severed his long ponytail with an axe, transforming his appearance and demeanor. Without the ponytail, Ghislain looked like a different man, more alive, determined, and ready for action. He moved to his weapons, asking if Jizlain had others with him or if anyone might be searching for them. Jizlain confirmed his group was alone. Ghislain inquired about Jizlain's enemies, to which Jizlain admitted he had many, with more likely to come. Ghislain picked up a spear and swiftly tied a rope to it. He hurled the spear through the wooden wall of the house, sending it deep into the forest outside. The spear tore through the wall and struck its target with precision. Ghislain pulled it back, demonstrating his formidable skill as the group watched in silent awe. The spear had impaled an assassin, who struggled to free himself from the weapon lodged in his chest. Without hesitation, Ghislain seized the man by the neck and demanded to know who had sent him. The assassin, revealed to be a member of the Wild Cats, was stunned that he had been detected. Jizlain considered drawing his sword but refrained, placing his hand on the hilt and expressing no desire to fight again that day. Ghislain intervened, reassuring Jizlain that he would handle the matter. With a swift motion, Ghislain snapped the assassin's neck, killing him instantly. Belinda, witnessing the killing, was shaken by Ghislain's ruthless efficiency and struggled to understand why her master would want to recruit someone so dangerous. Kneeling before Jizlain, Ghislain swore his loyalty and pledged to place his life in Jizlain's hands. Recognizing the immense value of such a powerful ally for his reconstruction plans, Jizlain accepted the pledge with a smile, eager to begin working with Ghislain. The narrative shifts to a secluded cabin nestled deep within the woods. A group of wild cats is assembled, the atmosphere thick with tension. A trafficker delivers the grim news: one of their own is dead. Shock and unrest ripple through the group, prompting their leader, Vago, to demand silence. After apologizing for the disruption, the trafficker relays Bernaf's assurance that Jizlain would neither find their reconnaissance unit nor be capable of killing them. Vago questions whether mistakes were made or if their intelligence was flawed. A trembling subordinate confesses: Ghislain, their former captain, has joined Jizlain. Vago's surprise quickly turns to a satisfied smile. His former captain is finally taking action. The scene changes to Ghislain traveling through the woods with Jizlain and others in a carriage. Belinda, cramped and irritated, complains about the sheer volume of Ghislain's weapons, enough to require a second carriage. She questions the necessity of so many weapons, suggesting a sword or two would suffice. Jizlain calmly explains that the extra carriage is needed for Rachel's comfort and that the weapons are a precaution, their priority being escape from the ravine. Belinda inquires about the captured assassin's allegiance, and Jizlain confirms her suspicion that Amelia is responsible. Belinda reveals the assassin's mask as a symbol of the Wild Cats, a powerful and notorious guild involved in various illicit activities: smuggling, assassination, drug trafficking, and human trafficking. Jizlain, intrigued, presses for more details. Belinda explains the guild's strength and ruthlessness, urging caution. Jizlain, confident in their situation with Ghislain, assures her they will be fine. Suddenly, figures emerge from the ground, ambushing the carriage. Ghislain reacts instantly, engaging the attackers with axe and sword. He swiftly eliminates several, but then a trap is sprung. Massive trees crash down, blocking their escape route. Belinda cries out in fear, but Ghislain manages to slow the falling trees, preventing disaster, though their path is now blocked. Vago appears, identifying Ghislain as the former captain of the Regressed Mercenaries. He accuses Ghislain of cowardice, claiming he disbanded the group for his daughter. Ghislain denies the accusations. Vago, enraged, blames Ghislain for his current hardships and questions his memory of past comrades. Ghislain's silence fuels Vago's anger. Vago declares his intent to force Ghislain to remember and orders his men to attack. Ghislain declines assistance, stating that Vago has a personal vendetta. He assures Jizlain he can handle it alone. Ghislain then unleashes a devastating mana-infused axe attack, eliminating several attackers. The remaining wild cats surge forward, but Ghislain's skill and speed are unmatched. Vago, impressed but not deterred, orders his men to encircle Ghislain. Ghislain mounts his horse, drawing a larger axe, and charges, unleashing a devastating mana-enhanced attack. He then uses a rope and axe to cut down more. With his men defeated, Vago attacks personally, his 3 blades aimed at Ghislain's horse. Ghislain dismounts just in time, facing Vago's incoming blade. He blocks the attack, denies being the captain of the Regressed Mercenaries, and strikes Vago with his shield. Vago demands an explanation, and Ghislain reveals he has abandoned his past and serves Jizlain. This angers Vago, who vows to kill Ghislain.